Let's take you to Glasgow and talk to Isabel Hilton, founder of China Dialogue. Isabel, you're there. What is the sentiment, do you sense? How close are negotiations to reaching any kind of conclusion?
There's still work to do, I have to say, but it's very intense. I mean, behind me there are people coming and going through the area where in those rooms, the delegates are getting down to really hard bargaining. We had a long session with Alok Sharma and countries expressing their views on the latest draft, which dropped this morning. And, you know, there is definitely some progress. There are, again, we're getting down to the moment when each country tries to defend its particular interests. So, you know, not everyone accepts everything. But I think that there is a sense that it won't finish tonight, but that we will leave here with something. And there were some very emotional speeches. Franz Timmermans, for example, of the European Commission, held up a picture of his infant grandson and said, when this child is 28, we will be at mid-century, and the decisions that we take here now will determine, you know, whether we're fighting each other for food and water when he's 28. So it was powerful personal stuff, and I think that there is definitely a feeling that they're not going to solve it here in Glasgow, but we have to move along and keep the process going.
Can you give us a steer on what sticking points remain?
They're fairly, they're almost the usual suspects. So there is still disappointment about the finance package, but again, on loss and damage, there is a discussion about setting up a new mechanism that would organise compensation for loss and damage. The details of that are still being argued over. There is a very strong feeling that, given that we're not going to leave Glasgow with nationally determined contributions aligned to 1.5. We have to accelerate the programme of coming back and offering fresh and stronger promises. And the proposal is that before Cairo, before the next COP, there should be another round of enhanced ambition, new NDCs. Now, I think China's a little nervous about that because China's planning process has its own rhythm. On the other hand, it's quite clear that if we don't align with 1.5, you know, we're just not going to make it. So if it is an existential threat, we have to treat it like an existential threat, which is what John Kerry and indeed Xi Jinping have been arguing over. So these mechanisms are important. Some of them seem a little obscure to people. For example, there's this thing called Article 6, which is setting the rules for carbon trading, and there's a lot of anxiety about those rules being really robust, otherwise they're not really doing any good. And a bad system would allow countries to cheat, it would allow double counting, it would allow, you know, it would bring the mechanism of accounting for carbon into disrepute. So these technical details get very important at this point.
The mood music 2 weeks ago when this started was very gloomy indeed. I wonder to what extent did this week's US-China announcement shift the mood?
I think it was a real shot in the arm, honestly. You know, it was a surprise, but it was a good surprise. And I mean, the difficulty is that when the US and China, when the biggest emitters are fighting each other, it just takes all the energy out of the process, because that's what people talk about, that's what they look at. And it makes it much harder to do everything else. So when you establish a positive cooperation, it has the opposite effect. You can see, you know, a way forward again, and one that's not being distracted by big hostility between the two over climate. So it was very positive, and I think you know, everyone is very tired here. You can see they're negotiating very late into the night. You know, you get documents released with timestamps of 2 in the morning, and everyone's kind of living on coffee. But nevertheless, the energy that agreement, that Wednesday night announcement gave to the process was very positive.
Just looking forward to the Presidents Xi and Biden meeting next week, I wonder what your expectations are of that.
Well, I think one of the important things that came out of the US-China agreement here on climate, it was the promise to set up a working group. And that work is going to have to be very, very coherent and very consistent, because you know, that is what the cooperation is going to be judged on. And there are there are ideas circulating in advance of the Xi Jinping-Joe Biden summit that working groups on other issues could be set up, and that we could see a beginning of a rebuilding of the kind of exchanges, not just government to government, but science and education and, you know, civil society and business, all those exchanges which help to keep relations on some kind of track and to avoid accidents, to, you know, avoid unpleasant things happening without anyone quite intending. That if that summit were to go well, and I hope that the climate agreement would help, again, the mood music there, that we might see a rebuilding of exchanges and more working groups and more collaboration. I don't know what's going to come out, but I would very much hope that that might.
Isabel Hilton, the founder of China Dialogue at Glasgow at COP26, thank you very much.